Welcome to this evening's event. I'm Annie McGowan with the Hellenic-American Cultural Center and Museum, also referred to as HACM. I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator tonight. That's Thomas Spathis. Tom was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Tom attended Oregon State University, and he also started his own ad agency in Portland. Tom is now semi-retired, and he's very vested in doing pro bono work for Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral, for AHEPA, Portland chapter, and for HACM. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you to Tom.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation. Thank you, Annie, for that kind introduction. Tonight's event is here live at the HACM Museum, which is located at the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Portland, Oregon. Behind me, you see the logos for the HACM Museum, but we want to say thank you for coming and being with us tonight. We have attendees from all over the world watching this, which surprises me every time, but we're so glad that you're all here. We'd ask that we thank you for your support, and if you'd like to be able to contribute to help future events, we ask that you kindly go to our website here up above, go to click donate, and you can make any contributions you deem worthwhile. We thank you for everything you've done here. I'm going to go over some ground rules for tonight's event before we get started. First off, if you have any questions, we ask that you click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, type in your questions. We will save them all till the end of the presentation, and we'll ask Dimitri the questions, and he will answer them for you at that time. Let's see what else we have. The question answers, I guess. So I'd like to introduce now with a short biography of Demetrius Stravakos. He was born in Lefkada, Greece, where he attended public school. In 1955, he came to the US for his university studies. In 1961, he graduated from the American University with majors in math and physics. He continued graduate studies at the American University and the University of Virginia. In 1963 through 65, he taught at Montgomery College, Maryland math, physics, and astronomy, and he was the planetarium director. In 1965, he joined NASA to work for the Manned Flight Division of Goddard Space Flight Center on the Gemini and Apollo projects for the trip to the moon. In 1969, he joined the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, to work in information management systems, where he officially retired early in 1987 to work as a private consultant. He provided consulting services in information management systems and telecommunications for 6 U.S. government departments or ministries. In addition, he offered his services to local governments such as Philadelphia, Ohio counties, and Montgomery County, Maryland. Some of his private industry clients and employers included multinational companies such as Lockheed Electronics, Northrop Grumman, and AT&T, among others. He participated in many Washington, D.C. area organizations to promote the image of the Greek American community and its useful and positive contributions to the American society, including fundraising activities for churches and education. In 1963, he co-founded the Reverend Thomas Daniels Greek Orthodox Parochial School in Washington, D.C. In 1976, as chairman of the Montgomery and Prince George's Counties Maryland Ethnic Studies Committee, he represented 21 ethnic minorities to participate in a White House conference on ethnicity and education with 67 other participants nationwide. In 1974, he participated as a Washington, D.C. community leader to promote the cause of Cyprus and raise funds for the people of Cyprus. In 1978, he represented the Greek American community nationwide among 500 various participating American organizations when he attended a U.S. State Department Conference for Human Rights, where he defended the religious freedom of the Orthodox Patriarchate in Turkey. Demetrius Stravakos has been listed in Marquis' Who's Who in the South and Southwest in 1971, Community Leaders of America 1968, and the Dictionary of International Biography of London, England 1970. He's a member of the HACM board since 2017. He's very happily married to Christine for 60 years. We are honored that Dimitri has joined us this evening to present tonight's presentation of a contribution of the Ionian Islands to the Greek War of Independence of 1821 at tonight's webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Demetrius Stravakos.
Good evening. Good evening. It gives me a great pleasure to be with you this evening. So we'll have the opportunity to discuss some of the contributions of the Seven Islands to the Greek War of Independence of 1821. Well, it's true that we do not have much time to cover all of this. However, we'll be trying to cover as much as we can in the allowed time this evening. Tonight, we're going to review the Seven Island history, review some of the political, cultural, and educational environment issues in the Seven Islands before the revolution, earlier uprisings on the islands against the occupying rulers, some major contributions of the Seven Islands to the revolution, and active and effective participation in securing foreign loans for the revolution, as well as providing support for the families of the fighters on mainland Greece. And of course, we will discuss the effective participation in the armed struggle against the Ottoman Empire. At this time, I know some of you may not be familiar with the Seven Islands, so we'll go over the map of Greece where you can see them. I have the pointer here right here to point to them. You can see their names on the right-hand side, 1 through 7. The first one here is the island of Corfu, which is next to the Albanian border. Right next to it is the small island of Paxi. How come I shared the screen? Share. Yes, okay. I'm sorry, there was an interruption. So the first island over here is Corfu. The next one is Paxi. Right below that is Lefkada, my home island. About 3 miles from Lefkada is the island of Ithaca, or Ithaki. Next to it is Cephalonia, Zakynthos, and at the bottom of the screen, we have the island of Kythera. Some of you are wondering why Kythera was included in the Seven Islands. Well, when the Russian fleet took control of the island of Kythera in 1879, they went ahead and conquered the other islands. And when the new Republic of the Seven Islands was formed, Kythera was included. The short review of the Seven Island history has as follows. After the Crusades at 1204, when Western Europeans occupied the Byzantine Empire, the Seven Islands were ruled by a number of rulers of Western Europe, which included Spain, Kingdom of Naples, and the Republic of Venice. In 1386, Corfu voluntarily became part of the Venetian colonies, and the following 3 islands became colonies in the following order. Zakynthos in 1485, in 1500 Cephalonia, and in 1503 Ithaca. Lefkada was the only island occupied by the Ottoman Empire during the years 1467 to 1684, after which time it became a Venetian colony. In October of 1797, actually, in 1797, I'm sorry, Napoleon Bonaparte took over the Venetian Republic. And shortly after that, the Russian fleet under Admiral Yuzakov and the Turkish fleet sieged Corfu, where the French occupiers of the island surrendered. In 1800, the Republic of the Seven United Islands is formed for the first time. So we have a free part of Greece subject to Russian protector status and paying taxes to the Turkish Empire, Ottoman Empire. From 1807 until 1804 and 1714, the French occupied again the islands for the second time under the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, which was between the Napoleon Bonaparte and the Tsar Alexander of Russia. And at the Congress of Vienna, between 1814 and 1815, the United Kingdom took full sovereignty over the United States of the Ionian Islands until 1864, when they were turned over to Greece. Here we have the 1800 flag of the First Republic of the Seven United Islands. As we said before, it was a Russian protectorate, subject to taxation to the Ottoman Empire. As you can see, the Seven Islands were free, but with strings attached. Next, in 1815, we have the flag of the Republic of the United Ionian Islands. You notice that the British made sure at the 1815 conference in Vienna that all the Ionian Islands, which are about 43, will be included in that republic. The political, cultural, and educational culture in the islands. The Seven Islands had developed a culture of their own, the Heptanesian culture. The form of government was oligarchic, where the ruling class was composed of a few large landowners who had received large tracts of land from the Venetian Republic because they offered services to that republic. At the time, it tried to take the islands from the Ottoman Empire. They maintained a feudal system, and they had to ensure tax collection from the working classes and prevent insurrections. The sons of the very wealthy Ionian Islanders were educated in European universities, primarily in Padua, Bologna, and Rome, and Italy, as well as at the University of Paris and University of Vienna. Thus, the very well-educated aristocrats of the Seven Islands had the opportunity to go to Europe, and there they could associate with enlightened European intellectuals and supporters of the American and French revolutions. You can see that they found these new ideas of freedom and of expression and independent thinking very appealing to them, while they were still enjoying the benefits or the fruits of the oligarchic feudal system their families had imposed on the islands. The Seven Island Republic was first to establish the first Greek university in the 1800s, the Ionian Academy. The advancement of commerce with the use of merchant marine ships, which numbered for the Ionian Islands about 403 of them, almost over 45% of the entire merchant marine fleet of Greece. They really started getting rich, and their greater wealth became greater than that of the old landowner families. This situation created the need to realign the ruling class. In addition, international commerce facilitated the information exchange or gathering and exchange, the establishment of bonds of friendship with people from other countries, and promoted the cause of freedom of Greece among the enlightened Europeans. Some early uprisings in the Seven Islands before the revolution. The first time some of the Ionian Islands were involved in an uprising against the Ottoman Empire was 450 years ago, and the Battle of Lepanto of Naspaktos in October of 1571. This is a unique major battle in the history of Europe. What we have here is the Papal States, the Empire of Spain, the King of Naples, and some other Italian small states, including the Venetian Republic. They all joined their forces to fight the Ottoman Empire so that it will stop expanding its encroachment into the Western Mediterranean Sea. Well, There you had actually 60,000 Western Europeans fighting 80,000 Ottoman troops. This was the first time that you had a sea battle, not involving the ships, but involving soldiers aboard the ships, fighting each other. Well, there were many casualties from both sides, especially from the side of the Ottoman Empire. In that particular battle, the Spanish author Miguel Cervantes lost his arm, his left arm in particular, and he joked about it later, saying that I lost my arm there because I was going to have my right arm through his writing. Cephalonia and some other islands participated in this battle in the Gulf of Patras. In 1357, the people of Lefkada revolted against their ruler, George Gratian, who was Lord of Lefkada, subject to the French interests in perpetuity since 1355. In the Cretan War of 1645-1669, or the Fifth Ottoman-Venetian War, the Ottomans lost over 70,000 soldiers trying to conquer Crete, which they did conquer. And they successfully occupied Crete. In 1770, another significant revolution took place in Sfakia, Crete, which was suppressed by the outnumbering Ottomans since the Russians failed to provide the promised military assistance. At that time, many of the people of that area, in Sfakia, Crete, moved permanently to Lefkada, my home island, and they established 7 towns, which is collectively called by name Sfakiotes, although every one of the villages there bears the name of some of the prominent families. In 1819, there was another significant uprising in Lefkada against the very wealthy landowners of the British and the British occupying the island because of a new tax on the poor residents of the island, trying to raise money to widen the channel to increase merchant marine activities. Here is the castle of Lefkada. It's also known to the Venetians as Santa Mavra Castle. Right here inside the castle, there's a small church called Santa Mavra, and this whole castle, as well as a town within it, which used to be the old capital of the island of Lufkada, was called Santa Mavra. The castle was built in 1302 by Giovanni Orsini, and it is on the mainland of Armenia, which is only 40 meters actually from the island of Lefkada. And this castle was improved in 1395 with double walls, and its entire area is about 25,000 square meters. This is an outer wall of the castle. It shows you there's a moat of seawater all the way around the island, and it is one of the very few exceptional medieval castles of Greece. In 1819, as we said, there was a revolt in Lefkada, and this Boza monument, which is shown here, is to commemorate that event. At that time, the British occupying forces, as we said earlier, tried to impose a tax. The local people objected to it because it was primarily expected them to pay for the cost of the channel, so they revolted. On this Boza monument, we also have some bronze figures which depict the 1819 revolt hangings of 4 persons, 2 of whom were Greek Orthodox priests who were executed by the British occupying forces. Here, this is the Lefkada Channel today, which was enlarged in 1819, for which the revolt took place. On the left side is the large castle of Lefkada, which is located on the Carnanian side. This is the Lefkada island here. And this is a floating boat which allows the automobiles to travel across, and also at the same time turns around 90 degrees so that the sea traffic through here, which is very busy, especially during the summer, can go through. This particular channel did not exist up to 660 BC. It was connected, actually. It was closed at that point, and it was opened by the Corinthians in 660 BC. Since then, the Corinthians became a colony of Lefkada, and later, of course, the Lefkadians always joined any expeditions that the Spartans were involved in. They were always fighting on the side of the Spartans, even during the Peloponnesian War. Some of the major contributions in the revolution. Among them, we will consider the facilitation of intelligence gathering and propagation to the mainland finders, which was a very valuable service during the Greek Revolution. The press and the poets' support in this effort helped a lot. After 1797, when the French occupied the Seven Islands, the Greeks in Corfu established a printing press for all official business. Then the civic associations assumed the responsibility to educate the public about their responsibility, as well as to propagate information about the new revolution. Well, at this press, they published certain information to be disseminated to the other islands, where they had handwritten papers or hieroglyphy because they lacked a printing press. One of these information items was the Rίκες Φεραίος Pean to freedom. Καλύτερα μιας ώρας ελεύθερη ζωή παρά 40 χρόνια σκλαβιάτικη φυλακή. It's preferable for one to be free for 1 hour than live for 40 years enslaved and imprisoned. The Seven Islands helped the revolutionary government to obtain foreign loans through their people in Corfu who had British connections, and they succeeded in that. In June 1823, the government of Greece authorized Ioannis Orlando, Andreas Ames, and Andrea Luliotis to travel to London, England, to try to obtain loans for 800,000 British pounds. In fact, Lord Byron paid for the trip expenses because the Greeks could not afford to pay for the trip expenses. In February 24, 1824, they secured a loan of 800,000 British pounds. For that, all public-owned property and all public sources of income were placed as security for paying off the loan. However, the loan net proceeds were less than 50%. They were only 298,000 pounds. The money was to be deposited at the Bank of Logothetis and Barf on the island of Zakynthos, and it was dispersed on a need basis, subject to a control by a committee of 3 persons. A second loan later was arranged on January 26, 1825, for 2 million pounds, from which Greece received a net amount of only 816,000 pounds. The loan was arranged by the Bank of the Richard Brothers in London. Again, as you can see, in the cases of both loans, the British overexploited the new Greek government. Participation in the armed struggle by the various islands. Kythera. The people of Kythera provided communication support and shelter to the Cretans and many Greeks from all parts of Greece during their Ottoman occupation, as well as during the Greek Revolution of 1821. Around 1700, after the Venetian Ottoman War, The Venetians also encouraged families from Crete to populate the island of Kythera, which was almost deserted. The people of Kythera, for 150 years, were migrant workers in many parts of Greece, including Asia Minor. Because of this historic fact, migrating to the mainland for work, just before and during the Revolution of 1821, many Greeks moved to Kythera, and they used the excuse that they were former residents of Kythera. So there were very few objections to them to move to the island of Kythera for shelter. In addition, even some Turkish refugees also found shelter there under British protection. What happened is sometimes when some of the Turkish-occupied towns were defeated by Theodorus Kolokotronis, then we had Turk or Ottoman refugees, and these people were protected by the British government, and they didn't want them to come to the Ionian Islands, so they financed their move to Kythera. The people of Kythera provided significant support to the fighters of the revolution and their refugee families before and during the revolution. Paxi is a very small island south of Corfu and offered many services to the revolution, including many fighters. The most prominent of them is George Animogianis, a member of the men of Laskarina Bubulina ship, the Allies. There, Animogianis tried to set in flames an Ottoman ship when his friends were begging him to drop the effort because it was very dangerous. And they kept telling him, dive into the sea to save yourself. When he turned around and told them, brothers, do you not want freedom? Let me be the first one to get lost in that effort. He was arrested by the Ottomans, who secured him alive in view of his fighting friends. Ithaca. The Russian Council of Patras, John Vlasopoulos, was from Ithaca, and as president of the Society of Friends of Patras, he offered many invaluable services to the Greek Revolution. 140 men from the Seven Islands under the leadership of Spiros Dracoulis from Ithaca were killed in the Battle of Dragachani in Moldavia, in Romania, on June 7, 1821. A battalion of Zakynthans also fought in Peta. Another group of Cephalonians and other Heptanicians, including Ithacians, people from the island of Ithaca, participated in conquering the Neocastron in April of 1821. The people of Cephalonia were the first Greeks to participate in the first battle, of Revolution of 1821. Andreas Phaelos, a Cephalonian captain, initiated the first sea encounter there. He had 7 ships or boats with him, and he managed to defeat 15 Ottoman ships and sink them with their crews. Alexander Ypsilanti was so impressed with that victory that he assigned Phaelos the responsibility to form the first naval force and declare him to become the first admiral of the revolution. Many times, many Cephalonian leaders paid the full cost of organizing and providing all military uniforms, supplies, and food and weapons in maintaining their own fighter groups. Some of them, like Matalas, Karalas, and Lycardopoulos, organized over 1,000 fighters for mainland Greece with their own expense. During June of 1821, the Battle of Lalas in Elis, Peloponnesus, took place, involving 850 Greek fighters and 4 artillery guns, 1,200 Ottoman men and 300 Ottoman cavalry men from Patras, and an unknown number of Albanian Muslims. Now, these people actually, the Albanian Muslims, were a menace to the society within the region of Elis, which is near Olympia, Greece, and they were threatening many times towns in Achaia as well as Arcadia in Greece. And even the Ottomans many times sent troops to defeat them, but they couldn't. All this time, the Greeks, with the Peloponnesian leader of Metaxas, charged against them and defeated them. And after 300 years, the Albanian Muslims had to leave Peloponnesos and they moved to Evia. In June of 1821, a cavalry of 12,000 Ottomans appeared in the valley of the Pruth and Zyzia rivers in Moldavia, present-day Romania, to face only 450 fighting Greeks, with 150 of them from the Seven Islands, under the command of Apostolos Stavrakas Panadas. According to Dionysius Kokkinos, who was in charge of the Greek fighters, he said about them, after they organized their defense lines, they proceeded to receive only Holy Communion and blessed bread, and they said to each other, "This is our last supper." This was the only food they had before the battle, as well as the day before they only had raisins. Most of them got killed. Here, Peter von Hess, a very good painter from Bavaria, produced this painting of Andreas Metaxas in leading the charge of 450 Cephalonians with other Heptanicians and Lalas, Elis of Peloponnesos, which was a stronghold of the Albanian Muslims. In this painting, you have the Alexander Ypsilanti crossing the Pruth River. Again, this painting was by Peter von Hess. When the leaders of the Greek fighters met before the Battle of Skuleni in Moldavia, among them was Athanasios Karpenisotis Maglaris, Apostolos Stavrakas Panadas from Lefkada, Sphalos and Barbaliaris from Cephalonia. Almost all of them offered the ultimate sacrifice for the price of freedom. Demetrius Stravakos from Stanica of Arcadia, a captain of 50 cavalrymen. In this battle, in his memoirs, describes some of the fighters. Apostolos Stavrakos, in charge of 150 Cretans, Enipirotes, and Heptanicians, demolished the Ottoman front guard forces. There were 300 dead and 50 wounded among the Greeks, while the Ottoman casualties were 1,600 dead. The great loss of the fighting of Greeks at Skuleni was the last battle of the fighting Greeks in Moldavia, which Alexander Ypsilanti had started in early February 1821, before the Greeks of Morea Peloponnesus began fighting. You're probably wondering why he started that fight in Moldavia. There was a strategic reason. Alexander Ypsilanti thought that if he opened a second front, in reality, actually, his was the first front, and the second front was opened by the others called Kotronis. This way, the Ottoman Empire would try to split its defensive forces or even offensive forces between Moldavia and Greece. Zakynthos. The society in Zakynthos was stratified in three social groups: the aristocrats or nobles, the middle class, made up of the merchants and other professionals, and the people who worked for the other two classes. Only in these three islands, Zakynthos, Corfu, and Cephalonia, the Venetians promoted a local nobility, where in these islands, the nobles ruled. It's also interesting to know, they also the nobles there managed to have a golden book or libro d'oro in Italian that listed all the noble families, and they themselves were to decide who was to be included in that book. The feudal system was dominant here as well. The people of Zakynthos fought in Petta under the leadership of Livadas, and they also fought in Lalas, an area occupied by Albanian Muslims near Olympia, Elis, Peloponnesus. Here we have a painting of Dionysius Solomos, the national poet of Greece, in Zakynthos. In 1803, John Kapodistrias, as Secretary of the Republic, recommended public education for the new republic. The republic voted for public schools to be funded selling the properties of the monasteries throughout the republic. Corfu, as well as the island of Zakynthos, were the centers of information gathering and propagation about the revolution via the printing press they had in actually Corfu. And they corresponded with many Philhellenes in Europe and America. The news about the revolution would arrive in Corfu, and then the European correspondents stationed there would forward the information to Europe and America. Thomas Maitland, the new governor of the Seven Islands, unlike his previous promises in 1815 of fair governing laws imposed by force, a very harsh constitution in 1817, by assuming all executive powers for himself, including all constitutional authority to impose new laws. He also took special measures to prevent any involvement of the citizens of the islands in the Greek Revolution, including penalties of imprisonment, confiscation of all property, and/or death sentences in some cases. In spite of all these British suppressive measures, many prominent citizens of Corfu were members of the Society of Friends. John Kapodistrias, the first Prime Minister of Greece, is the greatest contribution of Corfu to the Greek Revolution. He was exceptionally intelligent, a great thinker, and most capable in organizing governmental affairs. He proved to be the best politician of Europe in international affairs, having served as Secretary of State of Russia in the 1815 Conference of Vienna, where he managed to keep intact the territorial integrity of France. And the French people are very appreciative of this. He also authored the Constitution of Switzerland and managed the cooperation of the diverse political groups of that country. Switzerland has recognized his contribution to their country, and in fact, he has been respected just as much and maybe more than he is respected in Greece. He was assassinated in Napoleon in Greece in 1831. He managed to raise funds from abroad, from wealthy Greeks and Philhellenes for war supplies and support of the revolution and for the war refugees. In fact, for the support of the refugees, his brother Riaros Kapodistrias was in charge. He also managed to successfully convince the leading Siliote fighters, this is very important, to support Ali Pasha, so that by having Ali Pasha fight with the forces, the Ottoman forces of Peloponnesus, then the Ottoman forces left to fight Kolokotronis will be reduced. And this was a good relief for Kolokotronis. Here we have the Ionian Academy of Corfu, which was the first university of modern Greece. The statue of Johannes Kapodistrias is shown over here. In March of 1807, when Ali Pasha of Epirus wanted to take over Lefkada, John Kapodistrias and the Metropolitan Ignatius of Arta played a leading role defending Lefkada. You're probably wondering why we're talking about events in 1807 were supposed to be covered in the 1821 revolution. It is very interesting that Capodistrias and the Metropolitan Ignatius thought that we would need to find an event and time to test the result of the Greeks if they are ready for the revolution. And this was the time. They did not plan this. Ali Pasha planned that. He wanted to take over Lefkada. For 2 weeks, they organized the defense line of Lefkada along a mile-long trench to resist 11,000 Albanian strong fighters that were coming from Epirus, and Ali Pasha had built for them, in addition to the main castle of Lefkada, 2 forts at the Karnania, the fort of Tekes and the fort of St. George in Playa, which is opposite Lefkada and within quarter of a mile or half a mile from Lefkada. The defenders of Lefkada were overwhelmed with the response of many Greek fighters that came by the hundreds, as far as 300 kilometers from Lefkada, and they came on foot. Some of the leaders who answered the call included Theodoros Kolokotronis, as a Kintian who came with a ship. For the first time, Theodoros Kolokotronis is a captain of a ship. Others were Katsandonis, George Karaiskakis, who is one of the 3 leaders of Greece in the revolution, those being Theodoros Kolokotronis, George Karaiskakis, and Bouboulina Laskarina, and Odysseus Androuchos, among others. Ali Pasha also had the support of French officers. The commander-in-chief for the defense of Lefkada was selected by Kapodistrias to be a general of the Russian army, who happened to be Greek, Emmanuel Papadopoulos. About 400 Kleftes fighters arrived from mainland Greece to Lefkada from Trikala and Metropol. The confrontation never took place because of international events. After the Treaty of the Tilsit Conference, Napoleon actually demanded from Tsar to give up the islands, and he did. So they came under the jurisdiction of the French. In 1819, the British tried to impose a new tax to raise money to finance the widening of the Lefkada Channel, to benefit the wealthy class and increase the income of the foreign occupiers at the expense of the very poor residents. The people of Lefkada were not going to tolerate that additional tax, so they decided to revolt. Here's another picture of the castle of Lefkada, and you can see that it has double walls and there's a moat all the way around it. It's an island by itself, and it's only 40 meters from Lefkada. The leaders of the 1819 revolt were Apostolos Staubercus Panadas, Nicholas Staubercus Veleges from Karia, my birthplace, and Panos Halkas from the Sfakotis village group. They gathered about 500 strong men, marched to the capital of Lefkada Island, burning some country properties of the wealthy Lefkadians, and threatened the peace in town. The British responded with threatening announcements and military reinforcements from Corfu. They actually had an actual confrontation. And there was a number of British soldiers dead and a few men from Lefkadians, but there were much more British soldiers than Lefkadians. Then the British placed a bounty on 29 Lefkadians. In addition, about 20 Lefkadians had their properties confiscated. 2 people receiving long jail sentences and 4 persons were hanged. Among them were 2 Greek Orthodox priests. Then they placed the bodies covered by tar and high posts, and they set them in flames. And they were burning for days and nights to terrorize the local population and discourage them from future revolts. Typical British style of intimidating threats of Queen Victoria's occupation forces in the Seven Islands. This type of display has happened in other islands as well. The Lefkadians built the Boza monument that you saw before to commemorate this event to honor the fighting dead of that revolt at a very permanent place location on the island overlooking the town of Lufkada and the Ypres and Acarnania coastlines of mainland Greece. The British acting governor, Frederick Adam, blamed Johannes Kapodistrias for the revolt. The peasants of Lefkada did not have to pay for the tax at the end. The rich people of Lefkada, including John Valauritis, the father of the poet, and two other wealthy Lefkadians, collected 3,000 pounds from their class and supervised the construction of the channel. Panos Halkias, one of the leaders of the revolt, was executed on September 22, 1819. The two other Staubercus leaders of the revolt managed to escape to mainland Greece to fight for the revolution. On June 17 of 1821, Apostle Staubercus Panadas, leading a company of 150 men from Ypres and Lufkada, among 400 fighters under the leadership of Dionysius Kokinos, among others, fought heroically to the end in the Battle of Skouleni, Moldavia. This was the last of the battles of the revolt against the Ottoman Empire, initiated by Alexandros Ypsilantis in February of 1821. According to the historian Panos Rodogiannis, the history of the island of Lefkada, Apostle Staubercus Panadas was the greatest hero of the Lefkada of the revolution of 1821, where 1,205 Lefkadians participated, according to Theodore S. Georgakis in his book, Lefkadian Fighters of 1821, a requiem for 1,205 heroic souls, which was published this year. In January of 1821, pretending in mainland Greece that they wanted to avoid fighting Ali Pasha, the fighting leaders Odysseus Androuchos, Demetrius Panurias, and George Karaiskakis, of the rank of Theodore Kolokotronis of Western Greece, came to Lefkada to organize the fighting units of Western Greece. This was a very important meeting. During the Mid-Fair Sunday on January 21, these leaders were gathered at the home of John Zabelius, who happened to be the head of the Society of Friends in Lefkada, where they planned in detail the locations and the timing of the revolution in Western Greece in the spring of 1821. That covers Acarnania, mainland Greece, all the way to Attica, all the way to Athens. They attended church service, and all of them took an oath at the small church of the Virgin Mary of Lachernon, in the outskirts of the town, to fight for God and country. They decided to ignore the threats of the British occupiers, who would execute known revolution fighters from Lefkada and display their bodies at the crossing point to the mainland, hoping to discourage others. At this gathering, Alexandros Ypsilantis sent them a message to Lefkada to ensure the revolution did not start before March 25, 1821, because he had in mind to initiate his revolution in February, the month before. Lefkada armed 853 Lefkadian fighters who stormed the Tikes Castle fort in 1821, about half a mile from Lefkada at the Acarnania, which was defended by 3,000 Albanian fighters. They defeated them and thus they liberated the northwest region of Acarnania, Greece. Within days, Theophylactos Psychilianos of Lefkada was fighting at Agrinia, which was called Brachochori at that time, with Theodore Grivas, with 30 Lefkadians, and Kytheras. Mavrokordatos praised Psychilianos for his valor, Stylianos attained the rank of colonel, and he was placed in charge of 1,000 fighters during the Revolution of 1821. This is the Tekes Castle, which is about a quarter of a mile from the big castle of Lefkada. This is the one that Ali Pasha built in 1807 specifically for invading Lefkada, because she had as many as 11,000 Albanian soldiers. In the spring of 1821, about 850 Lefkadans who stood before stormed the 3,000 Albanians in this castle, and of course they conquered it and they liberated northwest Akarnania of Greece. According to Roderick MacLeod, Britton, a scholar from Scotland, an article of Life of GR made the point that the Greek Revolution of 1821 is an international event of great importance and not a local revolution somewhere in a corner of Europe. It was a successful national liberating event that created a new country and broke the mold of multi-ethnic empires to a new world of new ethnic countries, by replacing the political status quo of the 18th century, which the conquest of Vienna of 1815 tried to preserve. In fact, many countries followed the Greek example as late as in the 1950s and beyond in Africa and became free. Some of them were India and Ghana, among others. India, of course, is in Asia. The Heptanicians who led the Greek Enlightenment for Greece were Eugene Bulgaris and Nikephoros Theotokis of Corfu, the brothers Ioannis and Zabelius and Spiridion Zabelius, and Aristotle Valaurides of Lefkada, and the Zakyntians, Andreas Kalvos and Dionysios Solomos. They led the intellectual life of modern Greece, just like George Soferis, the Nobel Prize winner in literature in 1979, said. The three poets who did not know Greek, Dionysios Solomos, Andreas Kalvos, and Konstantin Kavafis from Egypt, they set the foundations of the modern Greek poetry. It is true, those three persons had the Greek language as their second language. They were educated in foreign countries. Dionysios Solomos promoted the modern Greek language first and foremost than anyone else, and Kostis Palamas credited him with that effort. Dionysios Solomos wrote poetry using the spoken language of the people, the Demotic language. And then a little later, Aristotle Valaurides followed his style and he wrote poems in Demotic language. What the American Revolution of 1776 started and the French Revolution of 1879 followed, there were socioeconomic revolutions where the people revolted against an oppressing governing class of the same nationality. The Greeks revolted against the foreign oppressor of different ethnic makeup. They also thought that they would accomplish that with the encouragement and support from many other countries. At least 1,200 European Philhellenes and Americans fought in the Greek Revolution. Thanks to the great number of Philhellenes in many countries in Europe and in America, the Greek Revolution became part of the world history because many of them fought in the revolution. The people of the Seven Islands wanted to join the great fight to liberate the Greek mainland and themselves as well. They had the determination, the will, and courage to fight for freedom, just like Dionysios Solomos, the national poet of Greece, expressed it in the national anthem of Greece. «Ω τριακόσιοι σηκωθείτε και ξανάρθετε σε εμάς, τα παιδιά σας θέλουν να δείτε πόσο μοιάζουν με εσάς. All 300 Spartans, awakened from being dead, come back to us so that you will see how your children are just like you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Demetrius. That was very interesting. If you have any other questions you'd like to ask, we invite you to enter your questions on the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen, and we will ask them and Dimitri can answer your questions for you. We have a few already. Dimitri, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Try to satisfy them.
The first one is, it's interesting that the Ionian oligarchs were able to associate with the Enlightenment types from Western Europe. Do you think this association is what inspired the descent of these revolutionaries and inspired subsequent uprisings?
I'm sorry, I don't think it did that, because the young generation, the educated, didn't feel like their parents. So actually, they genuinely believed in the new ideas. And they're the ones who really participated and have the Seven Islands fight with the Greeks.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple people have commented and they're asking, can you give more information about Apostolos Staubercus and are you related to him?
Okay, well, Apostolos Stravakos Panadas, Panadas is the nickname because in the town of Karia where I was born, there about 19% of the people are called Staubercus. And the family has been there of Staubercus since 1400, before Columbus came to this country. Now, I remember in 1951, 70 years ago, I was asking my father about how far our family goes. And he was very good because he knew most of the townspeople. And he told me that, going back using the nicknames, he came to Panadas. And Panadas, the fighter, was first cousin of the grandfather of my great-grandfather.
Interesting. I have another question. Can you talk a little bit about the loan that was assumed by the people? It sounds like a turning point.
Well, you're talking about the loans?
Yeah, the loans from the British.
Well, basically, they used them for military purposes, and some of this was also squandered, but most of it was wasted in the form of, it was an excessive interest rate, considering that in both cases, the British banks collected in advance 2 years of interest. That's why it ended up getting so little. Normally, you collect the full amount and you pay on time. But they collected only less than 45%.
Oh.
And that made it worse. So it wasn't adequate, actually.
Wow. If anybody else has any other questions, please again enter them on the Q&A portion of the screen. We have one comment. Were there any prominent Lefkadians who were distinguished in the War of Independence?
Were there any prominent Lefkadians?
Yes.
Well, like I said, Theophilatos Psyllianos, among the fighters, Staubercus, Panadas, another fighter, and many others. But some of the educated Greeks were distinguished, like the ones I mentioned, the Zabelius brothers, that they were very prominent. One of them was a judge and also the head of the Society of Friends of Lefkada, who primarily took the responsibility among his class, the well-to-do, to raise all the funds for all the fighters and all the supplies for the revolution.
Interesting.
There was also a very prominent doctor, Petrichopoulos, who served 3 times in all 3 sieges of Messaloniki. And he managed to escape Messaloniki the 3rd time. And actually, he was given the sword of Lord Byron. And he used that to get out free from Messaloniki. And then he donated that to the Benaki Museum.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure that led to a lot of other historical conflicts in the future with the financial issues they had to deal with, of course, and still are. I don't have any other questions. Oh, here we go. Another one. Please tell us about the flag of the U.S. of the Ionian Islands.
I beg your pardon? About?
Tell us about the flag of the U.S. of the Ionian Islands.
I didn't get the first word about the.
I'm just reading it verbatim. It says, please tell us about the flag of the U.S.
Oh, I see, about the flags. Okay, we can go back. We can go back, actually. We don't have to. Well, the first flag of the 1800, it was the flag of the United Seven Islands.
I see.
Because of that, you have the lion there, which looks like it is a lion with 7 arrows. They stand for the 7 Islands. And that republic lasted from 1800 until 1815, when the conference in Vienna changed the name of the republic. And I can think of one reason. Probably the British insisted on that, because instead of having the Republic of 7 Islands, they made it the Republic of the United Ionian Islands, to include 43 islands. They're 47, 43 minus 7, can 36 more real islands. So now the 1815 flag includes all the islands.
I see.
That's the difference between the two flags. And you can see, because actually in 1815, the flag represented a protectorate of England. You have the Union Jack and the Lion of the 7 Islands. That's why it's different. Before, it was only their own flag. And truly, it was an independent country, but with strings attached. It was the beginning between 1800 and 1815 was a protectorate of Russia, the obligation to pay taxes to the Ottoman Empire. After 1815, it was a protectorate of England. And the people were paying taxes to support the British occupying forces, as well as all public services. That's the difference between the two flags.
I see. I see. Thank you. Well, I think that concludes the questions at this time. We thank you very much, Demetrius. It was very interesting, and you're very knowledgeable about these topics, and we're honored to have you here tonight to help enlighten us. And we look forward to having future presentations here at HACM. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for attending tonight. If it's the people because of you that allow us to be here and put these presentations together. If you could contribute to help, please go to the website Hellenic-American.cc.org and click on donate to give you the ability to let us bring other presentations like this to you in the future. The HACM of the Hellenic-American Cultural Center and Museum was named one of the top 18 educational attractions in Portland just recently by Hassan Realty, so we're very honored to have that. We have some exciting presentations here at the museum now and exhibits. We invite you to go to our website to look up and find out more. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you very much. I'd now like to return this to Anne McGowan, our president.
Hello, and I would just like to thank Demetrius for such a great presentation on our heritage. He is truly one great historian who brings all of that to life. So thank you, Dimitri. And thank you to Tom for being our monitor tonight. I really appreciate that. And also to all of you who attended tonight, thank you for attending and supporting us in many more ways than just donating, but just by being here. And we all appreciate that very, very much. So thank you all. And I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to more presentations like this and even different. So thank you very much and good night.